The air was unusually crisp for late summer, the kind of evening that reminded me of why I'd chosen to settle in this quiet town. The drive home from the precinct was uneventful, a rare moment of peace after a grueling shift. I parked my cruiser in the driveway, noticing the faint glow of lights in the living room window. Mary was home, probably curled up on the couch with one of her crime dramas, a little irony that never failed to amuse me. After all, I spent my days living what her favorite shows tried to replicate. I stepped inside, hanging my jacket on the hook by the door. The house smelled faintly of lavender, her go-to candle scent, and something I couldn't quite place. A hint of jasmine, maybe? It was familiar, but I couldn't immediately pin down why. The quiet enveloped me, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick of the grandfather clock Mary insisted on keeping. "Mary?" I called, kicking off my boots. No answer. I moved further into the house, noting the half-empty glass of wine on the kitchen counter. That was odd. Mary rarely drank without me, unless she had a particularly bad day. I checked the living room, but it was empty. The throw blanket she loved was neatly folded, the cushions on the couch arranged just the way she liked them. Everything was in its place, except her. I climbed the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister, a habit born from countless late-night returns. The faint murmur of voices drew me toward the bedroom. I stopped outside the door, which was slightly ajar. The angle offered me a narrow view of the room, a sliver of the bed, the edge of the nightstand, and a faint glow from Mary's bedside lamp. At first, I thought she was on the phone. Her voice, soft but animated, drifted through the gap. Then came another voice, deeper and unfamiliar. My chest tightened. I strained to hear, catching fragmented sentences. "Can't keep this up forever," Mary said, her tone tinged with something I hadn't heard in years. Excitement? Fear? The man responded, his words too low for me to catch, but the cadence was casual, intimate. It wasn't the kind of conversation you had with a colleague or a friend. My pulse quickened, the rhythm pounding in my ears as I pieced together the implications. Mary laughed. It wasn't the polite chuckle she used at PDA meetings or dinner parties. It was genuine, the kind of laugh that used to be reserved for me. My hand tightened on the door frame, the wood groaning faintly under the pressure. I could have barged in. Every instinct screamed at me to do so, to demand answers, to confront whatever was happening on the other side of the door. But years on the force had taught me the value of patience, of strategy. Acting without knowing the full picture often made things worse. I stepped back, retreating down the stairs as quietly as I could. My mind raced, alternating between denial and anger. There had to be an explanation. Maybe it was harmless, a misunderstanding. Or maybe it was exactly what it sounded like, a betrayal. In the kitchen, I paced the length of the room, my fists clenching and unclenching. The wine glass on the counter caught my eye again, mocking me with its casual presence. I picked it up, swirling the liquid absently as I tried to think. If Mary was cheating, I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. Not just for me, but for the storm that would follow. Divorce, lawyers, the messy unraveling of a life we'd spent 15 years building together. I set the glass down with a hard thunk, the sound echoing in the empty house. The next day, I started making plans. After my shift, I stopped by an electronics store and bought a few surveillance cameras. Nothing fancy, just small, discreet devices I could hide in plain sight. That night, while Mary was in the shower, I placed them around the house. One in the living room, another in the kitchen, and the third in the bedroom. I hated myself for it, but the gnawing suspicion left me no choice. Over the next few days, I watched her closely. She was careful, almost too careful. Her phone never left her side, and her conversations with me were pleasant but shallow. I couldn't tell if she was hiding something or if I was just imagining things. Our routines stayed the same. Dinner at 6, a couple of hours in front of the TV, then bed. Yet, the distance between us felt like a chasm. On Friday, I reviewed the footage for the first time. My hands shook as I loaded the files onto my laptop. The first few hours were uneventful. Mary tidying the house, answering emails, scrolling through her phone. Then came the kitchen recording. She was on the phone, her back to the camera, her posture tense. "It's not that simple," she said, her voice low. She glanced toward the living room, as if checking to see if I was around. "I just need a little more time." There was a pause, followed by a faint laugh. "You worry too much. He doesn't suspect anything." I paused the video, my heart hammering in my chest. That laugh, the same one I'd heard through the bedroom door. It confirmed everything I'd been dreading, yet it still felt like a punch to the gut. I spent the weekend in a daze, going through the motions while my mind replayed her words. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but something held me back. I needed more evidence, more clarity. Without it, she could deny everything, twist the truth, make me doubt myself. On Monday, I decided to work from home. Mary left for her yoga class around noon, giving me the perfect opportunity to search the house. I started with the bedroom, pulling open drawers and rifling through her things. I felt like an intruder, but desperation outweighed guilt. It wasn't until I checked the bathroom that I found it. A second phone, hidden behind a stack of towels in the linen closet. It was a cheap, burner-style phone, the kind people used when they didn't want to be traced. My hands shook as I powered it on. The messages were damning. Dozens of texts, some explicit, others mundane, but all undeniably intimate. Her lover, Matt, according to the messages, wasn't just a fling. He was a presence in her life, someone she confided in, planned with. I scrolled through the messages, my vision blurring with anger and betrayal. They'd been seeing each other for months, maybe longer. One message in particular stopped me cold. "Saturday night. I'll leave the back door unlocked." I turned off the phone and placed it back in its hiding spot. The room spun as I tried to process what I'd just uncovered. The back door unlocked. Saturday night. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. I had everything I needed now, proof of her betrayal, evidence of her plans. But what I didn't have was a way to confront her without everything spiraling out of control. For now, I'd wait. Let her think she was still in control. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The next few days were torture. Every time Mary smiled at me, every time she kissed me goodnight, it felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. But I kept my facade intact, the same way I'd learned to do during interrogations. Calm, composed, unreadable. Inside, though, I was a storm. That burner phone had set my thoughts spinning in 100 directions. Who was Matt? What did he do? And, most importantly, why? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just infidelity. Something about the meticulous planning, the secrecy. It felt calculated, not spontaneous. It wasn't just about lust. It couldn't be. I took the day off Thursday to dig deeper. My first stop was the burner phone. After Mary left for work, I retrieved it again, this time copying the data to my laptop. Her messages to Matt painted a clearer picture. He wasn't just some random fling. He was organized, precise. They used vague language, avoiding specifics. But a few details stood out. "Matt, did you get it sorted?" "Mary, almost." "He's starting to get suspicious, though." "Matt, don't worry. We're still on track. Saturday will fix everything." "Almost?" "Get what's sorted?" My instincts as a cop kicked in. This wasn't just an affair. There was something bigger at play. But what? The texts hinted at coordination, almost like they were working toward something. A plan. But what did that mean for me? Was I just collateral damage, or was I the target? The second clue came from my bank account. I rarely paid attention to our finances. Mary handled most of it. We'd agreed on it years ago. I trusted her implicitly back then. Now, that trust felt like the biggest mistake of my life. I logged into our joint account, the unease growing with every keystroke. The numbers didn't make sense. Large, recurring withdrawals, amounts just small enough to avoid raising immediate red flags, were being made from our savings. They were labeled as household expenses, but we hadn't done any renovations or major purchases recently. The total added up to nearly $30,000 over the past 6 months. It didn't take long to trace the withdrawals to a separate account, one I didn't recognize. When I tried to log in using her typical passwords, I was denied access. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. Mary was siphoning money. But for what? And why hide it? I didn't have the luxury of confronting her yet, not without knowing exactly what was going on. That night, while she was in the shower, I activated a GPS tracker I'd bought earlier in the week. Small and discreet, it fit perfectly under her car's rear bumper. I also planted a voice recorder in her glove compartment, hoping it would capture conversations during her drives. The following day, I started monitoring her movements through the tracker's app. She stuck to her routine for the most part: work, the occasional yoga class, errands around town. But Friday afternoon, something changed. Mary left work early, driving to an unfamiliar address in the industrial part of town. The building she stopped at was nondescript, its windows tinted and the signage vague. Parker Consulting Group. She stayed for an hour before driving home. That night, I replayed the audio from the recorder in her car. Most of it was unremarkable: music, silence, the occasional phone call to a friend. But then came a conversation that stopped me cold. "Matt, Parker's good with the paperwork. He says it'll be clean." "Mary, and you're sure he can't trace it back to me?" "Matt, relax. By the time he notices, it'll be too late." "Paperwork? Clean? Trace it back?" My mind raced. They weren't just having an affair. They were orchestrating something far more sinister. Embezzlement? Fraud? Worse? I dug deeper into Parker Consulting Group. A quick online search revealed almost nothing. No website, no client reviews, no real digital footprint. That alone was suspicious. Through a few contacts at the precinct, I managed to pull up the building's lease records. It was rented under a shell company, a common tactic for keeping operations off the radar. Whoever Matt was, he wasn't just some sleazy boyfriend. He was dangerous. By Saturday morning, the pieces were beginning to fall into place. Mary's affair was a smokescreen, a way to distract me while she and Matt executed whatever plan they had. The financial trail pointed to embezzlement, possibly worse, and Parker Consulting Group was likely the linchpin in their scheme. But there was still one piece missing: motive. Why risk everything? Why betray me, siphon our money, and partner with a man like Matt? The answer came just hours before their planned rendezvous. Using one of the precinct's resources, a favor I'd be hard-pressed to explain later, I ran a background check on Matt. His full name was Matthew Parker, and he wasn't just Mary's lover. He was an ex-con, arrested twice for financial fraud. His scams had ruined dozens of families, but he'd served only 3 years before being released on parole. Suddenly, everything clicked. Matt wasn't just her lover. He was her partner in crime. And Mary wasn't just some naive accomplice. She'd been funneling money into their operation, using our savings to bankroll whatever they were planning. I spent the day setting my trap. First, I contacted a trusted colleague, Detective Sarah Collins, and gave her the basics without revealing too much about my personal involvement. She agreed to be on standby in case I needed backup. By 8:30 p.m., I was parked a block away, watching our house through binoculars. At 9:15, Matt's car, a black BMW, pulled into the driveway. He walked casually up to the back door, which Mary had, as promised, left unlocked. I waited until he disappeared inside before making my move. Quietly, I approached the house, slipping in through the front door. The surveillance cameras I'd installed earlier in the week were live streaming to my phone. I watched as Mary and Matt settled in the living room, their voices low but clear. "Did you bring everything?" she asked, her tone brisk. Matt nodded, pulling a manila envelope from his bag. "Sign these, and we're golden. By Monday, the account will be cleared, and he won't know what hit him." Cleared. They were planning to drain what was left of our savings, and possibly more. My hand hovered over my service pistol, the weight of it grounding me. I could arrest them both right now, in this charade with a pair of handcuffs. But I wasn't ready for it to be over. Not yet. Instead, I crept upstairs to retrieve the burner phone. Quietly, I turned on its camera, pointing it at the living room below. "Here's to the next chapter," Mary said, raising a glass of wine. Matt clinked his glass against hers. "To freedom." I recorded every word. From my perch upstairs, I watched their toast through the sliver of the banister. My hand tightened around the burner phone, its camera recording every smug grin and clink of glass. They were celebrating, oblivious to the storm brewing just above their heads. My mind buzzed with the weight of their betrayal, but anger alone wasn't enough. I needed revenge, not just justice, but something that would leave them reeling. If they wanted to take everything from me, they discovered too late that I was already steps ahead. I stayed awake long into the night, replaying the footage I'd captured and sketching out my plan. The surveillance was rock solid, enough to take to the authorities and end their operation. But that wasn't enough for me. Simply arresting them would make me another victim of their scheme. A man who lost his marriage, his savings, and his pride to a con artist and his cheating wife. No, I wanted them to feel every ounce of what they'd stolen. First, I needed to disrupt their trust in each other. Betrayal was a poison. Once planted, it would spread until they couldn't rely on one another. I'd use their own paranoia to unravel them. I started with Matt. Over the next 2 days, I used a secure burner phone to send him anonymous text messages. The first was cryptic but deliberate. "She's not telling you everything." His response was almost immediate. "Who is this?" I didn't reply. The goal wasn't a conversation. It was to plant the seed. A day later, I sent another. "Ask her about the money. Not all of it's in the account." By the third message, I could sense his unease. "You're messing with the wrong guy. Tell me who this is." I chuckled darkly. Matt was used to being the one in control, manipulating others. He had no idea how it felt to have someone turn the tables. Mary was next. She thought she had me pegged, a distracted husband too wrapped up in work to notice her lies. I'd make her regret underestimating me. The night after their rendezvous, I confronted her, gently, strategically. "You seemed happy on Saturday," I said casually as we lay in bed. She stiffened, her back turned to me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's nice to see you smiling again. You've been so stressed lately." Her shoulders relaxed, but I caught the subtle twitch in her hand as she adjusted her pillow. "Just yoga. It's been helping." "Good." I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "Oh, by the way, I've been looking into our finances. We should talk about it tomorrow." She froze. I felt it in the way her body went rigid. Her breathing quickened ever so slightly, but she forced a light laugh. "Sure. What's on your mind?" "Just some discrepancies in the account. Probably nothing. We'll go over it after work." I smiled to myself as she murmured goodnight, her voice tight with forced normalcy. She wouldn't sleep that night. I was certain of it. While Mary squirmed under the weight of my vague accusations, I turned my attention back to Matt. Using a private investigator I trusted from the precinct, I had him trail Matt's movements. It didn't take long for the PI to uncover the first crack in Matt's armor. He was juggling more than just my wife. The report came back with photos of Matt cozying up to another woman at a bar downtown. She was younger, with striking red hair and a bold confidence that suggested she wasn't just a casual fling. The PI identified her as Lisa Reynolds, a local event planner. I couldn't have scripted a better complication. Matt's double-dealing presented an opportunity too good to pass up. I began following Lisa's social media, noting her patterns and habits. Within a few days, I discovered she was planning an event at a downtown gallery, one that Mary might find very interesting. As the weekend approached, I set my first trap. I waited until Mary was out running errands, then placed a printed photo of Matt and Lisa in her car, folded neatly in the passenger seat. No note, no explanation, just the image. That evening, I watched her carefully. She was unusually quiet, her movements tense and deliberate. At dinner, she barely touched her food, her eyes darting toward me like she was trying to gauge my mood. "You okay?" I asked, feigning concern. "Yeah, just tired," she said, forcing a smile. The game was working. I didn't know if she confronted Matt yet, but the photo had done its job. Mary was unraveling, her confidence shaken. By Saturday, the pieces were in motion. I made sure Mary saw me leave for my late shift at the precinct, then doubled back to follow her car. Sure enough, she drove straight to the downtown gallery where Lisa's event was in full swing. From my vantage point across the street, I watched her enter the building. It didn't take long for her to spot Matt, who was leaning casually against the bar, chatting with Lisa. The scene played out like a well-rehearsed drama. Mary approached, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. Matt's smile faltered as he noticed her, his body language stiffening. Lisa, oblivious to the tension, laughed at something he said, placing a hand on his arm. Mary's voice was too low for me to hear, but her gestures were unmistakable. She pointed at Lisa, then at Matt, her movements sharp and accusatory. Matt tried to calm her down, but Mary was having none of it. I recorded every second from my phone, the thrill of control coursing through me. The fallout was immediate. Mary left the gallery in a huff, her face flushed with fury. Matt stayed behind, but the tension between him and Lisa was palpable even from across the street. The next morning, I received a call from Sarah Collins. "You're playing with fire. You know that," she said, her tone equal parts amused and concerned. "That's the idea," I replied. She sighed. "I did some digging on Parker Consulting. You're right. It's shady as hell. The shell company traces back to an offshore account, and Matt Parker's name is all over it. Whatever they're doing, it's big." "Perfect," I said, a grim smile spreading across my face. "Be careful, Jack. These kinds of people don't play fair." "Neither do I." The next phase of my plan was set. Now it was time to let the dominoes fall. Mary didn't say much over the next few days, but her silence spoke volumes. I could see the weight of doubt pressing down on her. The photo had worked. She was questioning Matt now, and I could almost hear the arguments unfolding in her head. Every glance she gave me at the dinner table seemed to hold a silent question. Does he know? I didn't give her anything to hold on to. No accusations, no confrontation. I just played the role of the tired, oblivious husband, biding my time. Meanwhile, Matt hadn't responded to my latest text. He was likely too busy dealing with the fallout from the gallery encounter. The beauty of it all was that neither of them knew where the cracks were coming from. I continued to track Mary's movements. She visited her usual haunts, yoga class, the grocery store, but there was one detour that caught my attention. On Tuesday evening, she drove out to a storage facility on the edge of town, one I'd never seen her go to before. She spent 20 minutes there before returning home, her face pale and drawn. The storage facility wasn't on any of our accounts, which meant she was paying for it separately. My curiosity burned as I considered what she could possibly be hiding there. Documents? Money? Something worse? I waited until Wednesday to check it out. After Mary left for work, I took a drive out to the facility, pulling up just as an employee was opening the office. "Morning," I said, flashing my badge. "Detective Harris, I need to access one of your units for an investigation." The man, late 50s, with a beer belly and thinning hair, frowned but didn't argue. "You got a warrant?" "Don't need one," I lied smoothly. "The unit's linked to an ongoing case. We're just checking on its contents." He hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and not wanting to piss off a cop. After a few tense seconds, he nodded and led me to the unit Mary had visited. When he unlocked the door, my breath caught. Inside was a stack of banker's boxes, each labeled with dates spanning the last 2 years. Taped to the top of one box was a ledger. "Need anything else?" the man asked, his voice gruff. "No, I've got it from here. Thanks." He left me alone, and I opened the ledger, my pulse quickening. The entries were meticulous, detailing large cash withdrawals, account transfers, and payments to names I didn't recognize. At first glance, it looked like a money laundering operation. Then I saw the most damning entry, a $50,000 transfer to Parker Consulting Group. The date matched one of the larger withdrawals from our joint account. My mind reeled. Mary wasn't just a participant, she was funding the entire scheme. I photographed every page of the ledger before carefully replacing it. If she suspected I'd been there, the whole plan would crumble. Back at home, I spread out the photos on my desk, cross-referencing the entries with the information I'd already gathered. The connections were clear now. Parker Consulting wasn't just a front for Matt. It was a pipeline for siphoning money from unsuspecting victims, likely through fake investments or fraudulent deals. And Mary was his inside woman. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Whatever love I still harbored for her dissolved under the weight of the betrayal. This wasn't a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment. This was deliberate, calculated, and cruel. I knew then that I couldn't just expose them. I had to destroy them. The next phase of my plan required precision. I contacted Sarah again, sending her the photos from the ledger. "Jack," she said after a long silence, "this is bad. Worse than bad. I replied. How fast can you dig into the names in that ledger? I'll prioritize it, she said. But you need to be careful. If she realizes you're onto her. She won't, I said firmly. My next step was riskier. I needed to plant doubt directly in Mary's mind. That night, while she was in the shower, I slipped into her car and placed another folded photo on the driver's seat. This time, it was a picture of her storage unit. The following morning, I watched from the window as she got into the car. She didn't notice the photo immediately, but when she did, her reaction was everything I hoped for. Her head snapped up, eyes darting around the driveway as if she expected to find someone watching. She sat frozen for a moment, then crumpled the photo and shoved it into her bag. When she came back inside, she was visibly rattled. Everything okay? I asked casually, sipping my coffee. Yeah, she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. Why? You look tense, I said. Something at work? No, just tired, she mumbled. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. But inside, I reveled in the growing fear behind her carefully composed mask. Later that day, Sarah called with an update. Those names in the ledger? At least 2 of them are flagged in connection with fraud investigations. One's a known money launderer. What about the offshore account? I asked. Still working on it, but I've got a contact who might be able to trace it. Good, I said, because I need something solid before Saturday. Saturday was the day Matt had arranged another meeting with Mary. This time, though, I wasn't content to just watch. I had something bigger planned. By 9 p.m., I was stationed across the street from our house, my surveillance equipment ready. Matt arrived on schedule, slipping into the back door as he always did. I gave them 20 minutes before making my move. This time, I wasn't going in quietly. I approached the house, my phone recording every step. Through the kitchen window, I saw them seated at the table, papers spread out between them. Matt was leaning forward, gesturing animatedly as Mary nodded along. I entered through the front door, letting it close loudly behind me. Mary, I called out, my voice steady and commanding. The shuffle of papers and hurried footsteps echoed from the kitchen. Mary appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Jack, she stammered. What are you doing home? Decided to clock out early, I said, my eyes flicking past her to where Matt was standing, frozen in place. Care to introduce me to your friend? Her mouth opened and closed, no words forming. Don't bother, I said, stepping past her into the kitchen. I know exactly who he is. Matt's eyes narrowed, his bravado returning quickly. Look, man, I don't know what you think is going on. Shut up, I snapped, cutting him off. You don't get to talk right now. I turned back to Mary, holding up my phone. I've got everything, Mary. The texts, the money, the storage unit, all of it. Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. Jack, save it, I said coldly. You had your chance to come clean. Now it's my turn. Their faces were a perfect mixture of fear and confusion. I'd built my case, but they had no idea what was coming next. And they wouldn't see it coming until it was far too late. The weight of their stares bore into me as I stood in the kitchen, their carefully constructed world on the verge of collapse. Mary, my wife of 15 years, looked utterly lost, her once confident demeanor now cracked and fragile. Matt, the man she had betrayed me with and her partner in crime, was already calculating his next move. They didn't realize I wasn't here to just confront them. I was here to destroy them. I've been watching, I said, pacing slowly around the kitchen. Every meeting, every lie, every dollar you've stolen. Matt tensed, his jaw tightening. You have no idea what you're talking about. I let out a dry laugh, pulling my phone from my pocket. With a few taps, I brought up the video feed from the surveillance camera in the living room. There they were, sitting at this very table minutes ago, discussing the next phase of their scheme. I know everything, I said, holding the screen up for them to see. Mary's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. Jack, please let me explain. Explain what? I snapped, cutting her off. How you funneled our savings into your little scheme. How you betrayed me in every possible way. Go ahead. I'm dying to hear this. Her mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Matt, however, was quick to regain his composure. "All right, you've made your point," he said, his tone sharp. "So what now? You call the cops? You ruin her life? Think about what this will do to her, man." I stepped closer, glaring at him. "I'm not ruining her life. She did that herself." Matt smirked, but it was hollow, forced. "You don't have the guts to take us down." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "You don't know a damn thing about me." The silence was deafening as I stepped back, taking in the mess of papers on the table. Contracts, account details, and an envelope stuffed with cash. Evidence of their crimes laid bare. I began gathering everything into a folder while they watched, too stunned to move. "You want to know what happens next?" I said, meeting their eyes. "This." I tossed the folder into my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and turned to leave. "Wait." Mary's voice cracked, desperation dripping from every word. "Jack, please, we can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want." I stopped at the doorway, turning back just enough for her to see my face. "You already made your choice, Mary. Now it's my turn." Outside, I climbed into my car and drove away, my pulse hammering in my ears. But this wasn't the end, not yet. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and the final act was just beginning. The next morning, I met with Sarah at a diner on the edge of town. She had spent the night combing through the files I'd sent her and had more than enough to put the wheels in motion. "This is airtight," she said, flipping through the pages. "The accounts, the transfers, the offshore shell company. It's all here." "Good," I said, sipping my coffee. "I want everything ready by tomorrow." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this? Once we go public, there's no turning back." "That's the idea," I replied, a cold smile spreading across my face. I spent the rest of the day tying up loose ends. First, I contacted the victims whose names had appeared in the ledger, anonymously tipping them off to the fraud. Then, I uploaded the surveillance footage and financial evidence to an encrypted server, ensuring that no matter what happened, the truth would come out. By evening, the first ripples of chaos began to spread. I received a call from Matt, angry, frantic. "You think you can just blow this up and walk away?" he snarled. "Watch me," I said, hanging up. The following morning, the hammer fell. In the weeks that followed, Mary disappeared from my life. She signed the papers without a fight, choosing exile over humiliation. Matt, however, wasn't so lucky. The charges against him piled up, each one a nail in the coffin of his freedom. The house felt quieter without her, but it was a relief. The weight of betrayal had lifted, leaving me with something I hadn't felt in months: peace. One night, as I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, Sarah called. "Thought you'd like to know," she said. "Matt's looking at 20 years minimum." "Good," I said simply. "And Mary? She's someone else's problem now." For the first time in months, I laughed. A genuine, unburdened laugh. I had one. Not just the battle, but the war. And it felt damn good. It started with the police raiding the storage unit, seizing the documents and cash inside. Matt's involvement with Parker Consulting Group was splashed across the local news, his mugshot plastered on every channel. Mary's name wasn't mentioned, yet, but she wasn't off the hook. While Matt was being processed, I showed up at his arraignment. He didn't see me at first, but when our eyes met across the courtroom, the realization hit him like a freight train. "You bastard," he hissed as the bailiffs led him away. Mary wasn't at the courthouse. She was at home, probably watching the news unfold in horror. I let her sit with it for a few hours before showing up on the doorstep. Her tear-streaked face greeted me as she opened the door. "Jack, what have you done?" "Me," I said, stepping inside. "I just did what you couldn't, tell the truth." She broke down, collapsing onto the couch as sobs racked her body. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of pity, but it was fleeting. "You didn't just cheat on me, Mary. You betrayed everything we built. You destroyed us." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she cried. "But it did," I said coldly. "And now, you'll have to live with the consequences." I handed her an envelope containing divorce papers and a summary of the evidence implicating her in the scheme. "You have a choice," I said. "Sign the papers and walk away quietly, Or I take this to the DA and let them decide how much of Matt's sentence you should share. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. You'd really do that to me? You already did it to yourself, I said. And that's how it ended. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment your thoughts below.